we're interested in talking to individuals who were in and around the former president and the White House during this important time, during January 5th and 6th, as well as the lead up and the many events that were orchestrated by those who were close to the former president.
Individuals who were in and around the former president. Take a look at a video, for example, where Ivanka Trump was standing right next to then President Trump on January 6th. This was before he went to stage. You see that? Before he went out on that stage to speak to the crowd of supporters who then marched on the Capitol in that breach. So she was right there. This is my point. She was there, not Peter Navarro, not Steve Bannon, who no longer worked at the White House, but Ivanka Trump. There's, of course, another family member now. She could shed light on what took place in those 7+ hours on January 6th. Her voluntary testimony puts that pressure on anyone else stonewalling the committee. And that's the big point that you don't need to be a lawyer or an expert on to understand. This committee has basically secured the cooperation of the vast majority of people it has summoned, including a lot of people in and around Trump world. We spoke with one just last week, you may recall, if you watched The Beat, who was one of the rally organizers. She cooperated. Jared Kushner just recently cooperated. Ivanka Trump now cooperating. If anyone has a potentially valid claim to some White House executive privilege, it'd be people like Ivanka and Jared Trump. They were White House aides to the end. Steve Bannon wasn't. They were with Donald Trump those days in a way Steve Bannon wasn't. And what are they saying and doing? They're saying, well, let's just cooperate. They're saying they don't have any special privilege to shield them from cooperating. What's Steve Bannon doing? He's testing this for some other reasons that only he knows. He's been invited back on The Beat, by the way, if he wants to explain them. He is trying to pick a fight with the government, the legislative and executive branch, with this new attorney general, to take this all the way to trial, to risk himself going to jail. And whatever the reason is, because I'm not here to speculate, I could tell you, according to Trump's daughter, what the reason isn't. It ain't executive privilege. I want to bring in our guests, staff writer for the New York Times Magazine, Emily Bazelon, and an editor-at-large for The Bulwark, Bill Kristol. Welcome to both of you. Emily and I talk a lot of law, and we'll get to it. But I go to Bill first on the common sense and as a veteran of the White House. What does it tell you that where the kids, I don't say it pejoratively, but where the kids and the children of Donald Trump, son-in-law Donald Trump, the staff, family members are testifying, what does that tell you about these possibly more political fights that the Bannon and the Navarros are picking?
It tells me that Bannon and Navarro and other people who were involved in the whole conspiracy for 2 months to overturn the election are much more worried about their legal exposure and maybe their kind of political exposure, too, if you want to think of it that way, than Ivanka Trump, who will shed light, presumably, on what her father was doing that afternoon. We know a fair amount about that. He refused to make the statement. She went in twice to urge him to do so. She's presumably confirming some of that reporting between those when he went back from the rally at, I think, 1:10 p.m. until he finally put out that video after 4 p.m. So that's pretty damaging from my point of view to President Trump. He's the president of the United States, and he's doing nothing to stop a terrible riot that's going on in the Capitol. So I think that, but she probably figures, honestly, that's kind of known, and she can dot a few I's and cross a few T's on that. She probably wasn't as much involved in the actual conspiracy. And I've talked to people pretty close to the committee, and what they stress is this was a real plot. The president, it was a Trump plot, but it was also a plot of Trump associates in Congress, Trump associates in the activist world, Steve Bannon world, you know, the legal world, the John Eastman world. These people were all working together to overturn the election. And that raises real legal questions. And if you're in the middle of that, the way Bannon was and Roger Stone was, you really don't want, I think, to be answering all the questions. Whereas Ivanka Trump, in a way, can testify to her father's dereliction of duty on January 6th, but probably was not as much part of this, the truly almost more serious part of it, which is the 2-month attempt to overturn the election of the president of the United States.
Well, it's very interesting what you say there, Bill, because I made a point of saying I can't claim to know what's inside Bannon's mind and his reason. But you say the evidence suggests the reason is culpability, guilt in the actual activity of this, which is why he and Navarro might reach for anything, including these thin claims of privilege. How privileged is it if Donald Trump won't even dash off an email or have someone else do it for him that says, yeah, I claim privilege. He hasn't even done that, as we discussed with Congressman Schiff last week. So I think you make interesting points, Bill, and that really goes to what they thought they could pull off. So I'm going to do a follow-up to Bill and then bring Emily in. But just on the goals, let's remember, the Capitol Police were completely outmaneuvered and overwhelmed with a federal government run by Donald Trump that wasn't helping secure the building. They did get order by that night. It is not far-fetched to imagine that a few more people show up to Washington and a few more people go inside the Capitol, or they start torching the place, or, God forbid, do other active physical things that they could not have returned that night. And then let's just be clear. You wake up on January 7th, all of these claims are as bankrupt and legally invalid as they were the day before. But the difference is the certification didn't happen. So what Navarro and Bannon and others have said that might sound really far-fetched suddenly becomes just a little more inside the Overton window of, well, the certification didn't happen yesterday. So it is still technically open. So maybe it does need to go back to the state legislatures. I mean, do the people you talk to see it as they had a method to secure something over those next 2 weeks and actually keep Trump in office?
I mean, I think they think it's much more the case that the riot was the sort of last gasp. They were hoping to delay it, and maybe still then it could get, as you said, back to the states on some fake claim and all that. But their hope was with Pence. I mean, think of the Eastman memo. Think of what think of the pressure they were putting on him politically. Think of everything they were trying was with the state legislatures first to say, oh, no, that's not the right vote from Pennsylvania. Then it was with members of Congress and the courts and with Pence, all in some different combinations. Once Pence said he wasn't going to do it, once it was clear there were only 9 Republican senators to do it, however despicable it is from my point of view that 140 or so House Republicans voted to overturn, it wasn't going to be enough. I think that is the core of the conspiracy. And I think I hate to minimize the riot. It was horrible and terrible in so many ways, and it was very revelatory of the resort to violence that Trump world and the alt-right world was willing to engage in. But I think that was kind of the last gasp of what was a much more serious, in a way, much more thought through and developed, for all of its kookiness, attempt to actually overturn, actually subvert the election of the president.